Hello, and welcome to Digital Day 2021, Part 2. My name is RJ Pulaski, Managing Director of TEEDS Canada, and I'm here to welcome you to Digital Day. Now, I think we all would agree, it's been a long 15 months since the way we've lived our lives has changed, and it's been just as long since many of us have even seen each other. Well, good news is here, however. In less than 12 hours, we will enter step one of our reopening and begin our journey back to a more normal way of life. And what better way for us to do that than for all of us to be here together today to reconnect as an industry and prepare ourselves for a bright future. Now, it's tradition for the title sponsor to introduce the moderator and panelists at the live event, as TEEDS has done in years prior. Thank you to the Digital Day Committee for allowing TEEDS this opportunity, and we're very excited to be a partner for this event. We would also like to send a big shout out to Acast, Double Verify, Narcity Media, as well as Zephyr. Without their contributions and sponsorship of this event, we would not be able to support NABs or donate scholarships to deserving students. Now, during the event, for those who want to be a part of the discussion today, please post your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. So now, on with the show. It's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for this panel, someone that is no stranger to Ad Club of Toronto. Drew oversees a team responsible for revenue growth at Double Verify that primarily concentrates on the United States East Coast, Canada, and South American markets. His main focus is on leading the sales efforts in those regions to promote continued adoption of verification services and highlighting the benefits of Double Verify's AuthentiCAD. And with that, Drew, welcome back to Digital Day, and I'll ask you to introduce this incredible panel. Thank you all. Have a great session.
Terrific. Thank you, RJ, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited about the topics that we'll be addressing and the content that we'll be sharing with the whole group today. And thank you to the Ad Club of Toronto for another wonderful event. It takes a lot of work behind the scenes to organize and execute these events, and we really appreciate all the work from so many volunteers that help make today possible. We also must thank our title sponsors, TEEDS and Acast. You know, the Ad Club's mandate is to raise and distribute charitable funds by organizing events that present the newest ideas and developments in the advertising industry and create social and business networking opportunities for all ad industry colleagues. And your support ultimately makes that possible. So as we jump into it, a little bit about me, and then I'm going to ask the panelists to go around and introduce themselves. So my name is Drew. I'm the VP of Sales here at DV, and I've been with DV now for a little over 8 years, which is close to 56, I think, in ad tech. And the space has evolved significantly since I first entered the advertising world on the agency side. I'm extremely excited about the future, and we're obviously coming out of a very unique time in history, a unique time for all of us to be alive. And we are seeing a huge amount of creativity emerge, especially in the digital landscape and certainly in the areas of anticipated change in consumer privacy and consumer behavior. This group of fine people with me today represent some of those creative minds that are pushing the boundaries of the digital advertising ecosystem. And I'm thrilled to share the stage with them today. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce you to your panel. We have Heather Gordon, the Managing Director from Acast, Yuli Shumsky, AVP, In-House Direct Digital Marketing Agency, Canadian Tire Corporation, Tara Richardson, VP of Sales at Zephyr Canada, and Kenneth Fernandez, Digital Supervisor at Apex. We'll go ahead and introduce each one of you. If you could take a quick minute, we'll start with Heather.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather. As you've heard, I'm Managing Director of Acast Canada, where I've been since last September, mid-pandemic. And prior to that, I was at CBC and Bell Media. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Yuli?
Hey guys, I'm Yuli Shumsky, Associate Vice President of In-House Digital Marketing Agency at Canadian Tire Corporation. I've been there for a few years, and I guess my background, my experience spans across standing up digital capabilities, agency or client side, standing up teams, processes, and just doing digital marketing the right way.
Terrific. Tara.
Hi everyone, Tara Richardson from Zephyr. I'm the VP of Sales for Canada. been working with Zephyr for the past 5.5 years. And before that, I worked at Olive Media, Post Media, Toronto Sun, Sun Media, all the medias, and have been in the industry for about 15 years now.
Awesome, awesome. And Kenneth.
Hey folks, hi, my name is Kenneth Fernandez. I'm currently the digital supervisor at Apex, which is a part of the Publicist Group, where we try to harness the power of the evolving media landscape to drive one-to-one engagement with the consumer at scale. We have scaled capabilities across investment, strategy, analytics, data, e-com, performance marketing, and content. So if you have any brands on the call or looking for some expertise, we're always here to help you guys out. And happy to be on the panel.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you, everybody. So let's just dive into it. As a reminder to the audience, the Digital Day team will be gathering questions live from the audience as well. So please submit your questions in the chat and Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them, time permitting, of course. We've got a lot of great questions and a lot of great content here. So let's jump into it, starting broad. Before drilling into audio and video separately, here's a big question for the group, and we'll go around to each one of our panelists here, starting with Heather. Third-party cookie deprecation is a big industry topic. This panel is focused on the ins and outs of audio and video. How will the loss of cookies impact digital audio and digital video? Heather?
Well, given that I'm on the podcasting side of the business, I can very happily say we've never had cookies, so there's nothing to lose. But from a larger perspective, I do know, having been at the CBC prior to ACAST, what a pivotal moment it is in the space, and all the work that's being done to try and replace the cookies. But I'll pass it to my co-panelists who are living it right now for a more recent update. Thanks.
I can jump in here. Heather, I totally agree with you. Working at Zephyr in our contextual targeting world, we haven't had to deal with cookies a lot either. So obviously we don't use any of that with our targeting, but I do know that there are solutions out there, and I believe that there will be better solutions made. What I do think will happen is we will see a shift from advertisers into contextual alignment, as opposed to leaning so heavily on audience targeting and cookies. It's really going to allow the content to dictate who's watching the video and what their current interests are on platforms. Pass it to Ken.
I think of late there's been a lot of hue and cry in the market about how cookies are going. But the first logical thing to do is when something you like goes away is, hey, that thing sucked anyways. So that's what I think, and I'll tell you why I say it that way. Cookies were never the best in the first place. When a cookie from a site is not passed on to your ad tech platform, that's a problem, because we miss a part of the puzzle that way. An appropriate match is not made. And often because of this, you must have seen the cookie match rate is very less. It ranges from 30 to 60%. In addition to this, cookies are very device-based. So yes, when someone goes from a mobile to a desktop to a tablet, you're fracturing the consumer journey. The loss of cookies will definitely affect the entire digital ecosystem to some extent, but it ultimately depends to what extent were advertisers reliant on those cookies. I think it's time as marketers, we take a moment to pause and understand how much of our buys were actually dependent on them, so we can plan next steps versus creating a havoc. In the case of audio, like targeting is around genres and contextual, as Heather rightly mentioned. So like those environments are pretty solid proof. As long as you have a platform, it's pretty good. But if you're looking with streaming devices, most of those devices went on third-party cookies like Bluekai, Oracle, Lotame, and so on. So we need to see how those things change, but there are definitely developments coming in the market which will help us on those areas as well. In the case of video, as Tara rightly mentioned, YouTube is a walled garden and they have no effect. But other premium publishers like say Rogers, Bell, Chorus, they have always been gathering our first-party data, which can be used by them to target us again. In the case of smaller publishers, I might say, they might have a bit of problem where they might not get the scale. In that case, companies like our sponsor Teeds they'll go up to them and say, hey guys, we are a small fish in the market. Let's take you on in our portfolio. And then we can use Teads and VR segmenting and targeting to basically target the entire market. That's my POV, but I'm pretty sure Yuli, who's an expert here, will definitely have his say as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Like, if we talk about third-party cookies, within the Canadian context, Canadian landscape, like third-party cookies were never really that good, you know what I mean? Like, just honestly speaking. And though, you know, a lot of people did try to target across third-party cookies and put a lot of money there. Just from experience, I never saw, you know, any good results that would tell me, yeah, this is a good way of doing stuff. And I think like cookies generally going away is definitely a good thing. As it was leading us to a lot of, let's say, misled decisions, especially around things like last click attribution and thinking that retargeting is this great and amazing, when in reality we should have been focusing on things like incrementality, you know, like brand lift and such. If we talk about cookies, like, you know, in the audio video space, I don't think it impacts a lot. I'm not going to repeat some of the things, you know, some people that know more than me about it in that space particularly already said, but I just think if you're maybe you're impacted in some ways around tracking and analytics, you know, if you're a content producer or a content streamer, maybe there, but in terms of like growth and kind of expanding your reach, anybody who is smart in the space, like they know to lean on their first party data, their subscriber data, their follower data to kind of just keep doing what they're doing and keep getting traction. That's what I think.
Terrific. Thanks, Yuli. So we'll stay with you as we start to dive into the audio portion of the audio video discussion here. There certainly has been a significant increase in attention around audio and podcasts in general. What role do podcasts play in the media mix? What role do they play today? And what role do you think they'll play in the future?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like, I guess I'll just drop a line here on what I actually think about it here. So in reality, like my perspective is from consumer point of view. And I think that, you know, like a podcast ad slot isn't really any different than like an unknown radio commercial and intrusive banner ad. Like, I'm not a fan of just dropping like cookie cutter commercials into some kind of audio stream or video stream. You know, what I enjoy are the cases where native marketing integrations are possible. Like, I'm much more receptive to an ad or a marketing message that does not interrupt my content consumption. Like, you know, I mean, if I see if a piece of content draws me in, you know, and I'm being advertised to simultaneously, like I don't have to watching or listening, you know, to what I want to hear or see, and the messages worked into my content consumption. I'm much more receptive to it, and I think it sticks a lot better, you know, with viewers or people that are like watching whatever they're watching. I believe podcasts that can do this will gain traction with agencies, and they'll attract bigger clients. In terms of position in the funnel, like the original question asked, I think it can be anywhere. It can be top funnel. And I've also seen this done really well as like a direct marketing message or tactic where you could use like a unique promotion code, you know what I mean? That's being communicated through the content. And I've seen this really well. And to my experience, you can put a, you know, podcast or video cast anywhere in the funnel. It just depends on how you work your message into the content that people are consuming.
Do you want me to jump in here?
Go for it.
Yeah, Yuli's right. Part of the reason I fell in love with podcasting and came to Acast was it's been so long since I've seen such an impactful, effective form of advertising. And when podcasting, what they get right is how to integrate in a seamless fashion. And it's why the stats point to the fact that most users don't mind podcast advertising when it's done right. And that's what Yuli was saying, is we would never take a radio spot and just wedge it into a podcast. The tone isn't right. The style isn't right. It doesn't feel authentic to the user experience, which is why a lot of what we do is the host-read integrations, where the podcaster talks about the product, they believe in the product, they've sampled the product, they've been given a basket of the product and have used it and can speak in a way that feels authentic to them and to the users at home. So it's an important part of the media mix, because podcasting does reach that unreachable consumer, the cord cutter, the people that in various forms of media in my career we've been chasing and trying to find. They're living in the podcast space, and when podcasting is executed in a beautiful, seamless way, it is so very effective. Hence why it is becoming so much more important to the media mix.
Sure. So on that thread, right, what opportunities or challenges does this present to the audio landscape? How is the audio landscape going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, in terms of podcasting, the beautiful, theater of the mind and creative is where we see it heading. We're not limited to a 30-second ad block or a 60-second ad block. We can develop unique, impactful creative that's built for the space, but not around a time constraint. So we're seeing longer form creative develop, what we call sponsored stories, where they're a little bit longer than a traditional ad read, but tell a different sort of story, get the imagination working, integrate the brand with the host. And further to that, we're talking to numerous brands about actually creating custom podcasts. So really taking that to the next level. We know podcasting reaches a really engaged audience. So why not speak to them on a larger scale, and sometimes leveraging our talent. So actually using some of ACAST podcasters to develop custom pod work. So, finding that sweet spot of entertaining, informing in a relevant environment. As far as 5 to 10 years go, that's a really long time in any sort of digital space, but just continuing to find that creative sweet spot, as I said, to continue to push the envelope in podcast advertising, but while maintaining what makes podcasting so great, which is, not too many ads, light download or light ad loads, and making sure that first and foremost, we keep the listener top of mind, and respecting their audio experience, and keeping that special, unique nature of podcasting alive.
Cool. Theater of the mind. I certainly wrote that down. I love that idea. I see some other people did too, but go ahead. Who was jumping in? Sorry.
Let me jump in, Andrew. One quick point there. First of all, let us say podcast isn't a fad. It's only going to get louder and louder, and brands would love to enter into it. I'm pretty sure for all the agency folks on the call right now, you have got that one email from the client saying, "Hey team, can we test out podcast?" And I'm sure like everyone's received that email in the past. So before entering podcast, what we need to realize is let's get a bit more familiar with the client, and let's see how audio as an environment works for the client, and then move into podcast. Let's test the waters first and then swim into it, because not all clients will have the same brand thresholds with each of the podcasts, because podcasts range from crime to comedy. Like each brand has their own brand guidelines, and we need to make sure we guide them as to in what waters they can actually play versus being out there. And let us consider a platform agnostic approach. So let's say versus saying I want to buy a podcast, say on Apple or any other platform. Let's say I want to buy a podcast with a publisher who can guarantee me I can buy that comedy genre irrespective of whichever platform they might play in, because that also solves the reach and frequency issue which podcast and audio always tends to have.
Fantastic point. So Kenneth, let's stay with you then for a second. There's a lot of discussion around AI and TTS, specifically, around the entire digital ecosystem. So how does this impact the audio ecosystem in particular?
That's a pretty controversial one and a tough one. And I'm pretty sure as and when our media progresses over the years, it'll definitely change. But let's take a look at how the audio ecosystem has evolved over the years before I jump into AI and how it will impact the audio ecosystem. So first, as we all know, we had radio, where we could rely on frequency to make sure your ad recall is maximum. I'm pretty sure you've heard the same ad probably 8 to 10 times, and that's how ads were bought, reach and frequency. And that time targeting was limited as well, and we merely bought radio stations. To all the folks on this call, I'm not saying don't buy radio. It's a wonderful awareness driver, so don't get me wrong there. Then came digital audio, Now we have the ability to target ads a bit more. We know demographic, we know psychographics, we know browsing behavior. But what happens is, since the audio space is still in its pretty beginning stage, inventory is often limited, due to which we see a high frequency ratio. Unless you've asked your frequency to be capped, I'm pretty sure you'll be serving a high frequency of ads. So the first two stages in this cycle has pretty much been a monologue. The brand is always having a one-way dialogue with your end user, and your audience probably has heard you 8 times, but it's still not interested in your product. And that's the harsh truth of advertising. How do you actually know your end user likes your product? So now we have seen a monologue, but audio will soon see a shift from a monologue to a dialogue. Here is where voice ads will be a change player with AI and machine learning. The shift will definitely help brands get a higher engagement rate. For example, let's take Tim Hortons as an example here. Tim Hortons on a fine Wednesday morning will say, the creative could say, hey, we are Tim Hortons. Why don't you stop by your nearest Tim Hortons and buy a coffee from us? The respondent could either stay silent, he would say nothing, or he could say yes. If he stays silent, you go back to listening to your streaming service or your podcast. If he probably says yes, the ad will continue on, and then he'll give you more information about the Tim Hortons coffee he was talking about. If you say no, again, you're back to your normal listening environment. But what happened here? Now you have some inside information on your end user. If he said no, he doesn't like coffee, you can pause there. We can do something called as a creative looping, and possibly you can reach that audience back again next week. And next week I go back and say, hey, it's Tim Hortons again. We know you don't like coffee, but we have a variety of other different things we can offer you. We have tea, we have bagels, we have a line of different food products to sell you. Would you be interested in that? And that's the level of engagement which AI is possibly going to get into. It won't happen tomorrow, but I'm pretty sure it will happen in the next 1 to 2 years.
Terrific, very insightful. Now, one of the things I wanted to pivot to here was just about creative development. And Yuli, this will be for you. And please, the panelists, feel free to weigh in. Creative development is evolving, right? There's more data than ever. And finding that perfect format seems harder than ever, whether it's short form, long form, 15s, 30s, 60s, 120s. How do brands find the format and length that best aligns with both the marketing strategy and the platform and the provider? Can you give us a little bit of a peek into that process?
Yeah, so I guess anything I can say here is based on my personal experience as a consumer, and on me having watched a bunch of pieces of like video stream content from places like Eastern Europe and Central Asia, like any Russian-speaking countries. Like I consume a lot of the content. Yeah, and you know, like what I realize is the longer the better. Actually, it's not simple. The main challenge is actually how do you do it without being annoying? This is where like I feel not the creative, but rather your creativity gets tested. Because reality is that no one wants to see long ads, like as much as we can say that people do, but you know nobody really does. Even if you make like a piece of content around the marketing message, it just oftentimes it doesn't feel authentic. Like you can have like 45-minute episodes about some hair product, and like I've tried to watch those, and I'm like, you know, this is not an authentic feel to this whatsoever. You know, no one wants to tune in and see ads. Like people want to tune in and see content. And I think like if you can find a creative way to make your marketing message present all the way through, like that would be ideal. And like it highly depends on the content producer and what kind of show or topic you know that they're generating. And like one of the best kind of within a video stream content ad placement I've seen that lasted pretty much the entire episode, and it was not a problem for a consumer. And is like this content producer person, right? He would buy a car and he would do like shock content with it. Like he'd buy an expensive car like a Lexus or Mercedes and just try to go like conquer crazy off-road obstacles with it. Like it's not a thing you typically would do with an expensive car. And what happens is they got picked up by like the biggest auto classified app in Russia. So like I guess equivalent of Auto Trader. And all this app did is like gave them a bunch of stickers and said, here, put these stickers, our brand name on your car while you do crazy things with it. So I watched this for like 45 minutes. I cannot stop watching it because I'm a guy. I know I'm like, oh my God, this guy's doing crazy stuff. You'd never see this like, in person, especially here. But the entire time I'm seeing this ad, this big sticker on this car. And to me, it's not intrusive, but it sticks like crazy. Like, I mean, I'm in Canada, and to me, it's stuck in my brain. So you can only imagine, like in relevant markets, something like that is probably the next level. So I think like there is no a set kind of thing, like this is how long it should be. It all depends on like what the content is and how can you work your message into it without being absolutely intrusive or unauthentic, or I mean, just trying to eliminate the fakeness, because people watch streams and podcasts because they want the truth, they don't want the fluff. It's like people who don't really watch soap operas on TV, right? It's the opposite spectrum of the population most of the time. And the way you integrate your message into that to communicate to them is very key. It has to come like, yeah, I want to see this content, and you know what, this message fits and it sticks, and I don't mind that it's there.
Can I jump in quickly and just add something to what Yuli's saying?
Sure.
I agree. And I think what he's saying is that brands, and again, I'm coming from a podcast lens, so, keeping that in mind, the content needs to focus on what problems the brand solves as opposed to the brand. So in the case of automotive, I might not want to hear a half an hour podcast on the attributes of a particular vehicle brand, but you know what? I might listen to a roadshow podcast where a couple people traveled across Canada and experience the best of driving in our beautiful country, brought to you by that auto manufacturer. So I think the key is to Yuli's point, is not banging someone over the head about why your brand is so great, but finding content that is that you can couple with it that is entertaining and informing to the audience.
Can I jump in there as well?
Absolutely.
So I think what happens right now is brands need to move away from the concept of cutting down a 30-second TV commercial and trying to fit it in a 15-second commercial, because you need to look at the platform differently and say, hey, I have a 15-second ad spot. What's the best way for me to communicate my storyline in that given time? And use that, because as long as your creative is good, as long as your creative has a message, your story is catchy, the end user will stick on it for the most of it. Like, I'll give you a very recent example which happened to me. I think it was in the month of March. I think when Bruno Mars released his new track, Leave That Door Open. I was listening to YouTube music on my TV screen, and suddenly an ad pops up about Leave That Door Open. It was a song within a song playing. So it felt so contextually relevant to that environment right there that I listened to the whole ad. I wonder who the media agency was. They must have got 100% VCR on that campaign. All that was a 2-minute ad. So like, it depends, how do you position your ad in the market as well. Another example is if you have any automotive clients right here, if someone's listening to an automotive review, and if your ad could be a review as well, like say if you have the Ford F-150 content playing, then probably you can have a competitive car company go in with another review, which is an ad. And for all you know, the guy might listen to the whole ad as well.
Right.
I think I can jump in here as well. I think that brands really need to understand what platforms they're using and probably create as many links as creative as they can, because it really depends on what the platform and which creative is going to perform the best. So I think brands need to invest in some testing dollars to do some A/B testing to see which length and which format works for each platform that they want to be on, just to give them more insights as to which ad length they should be using.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great feedback. Some themes I'm hearing are, some principles in advertising, right, that still need to be adhered to, solving consumer challenges, meeting unmet needs, et cetera. But then also, right, evaluating one's own marketing resources and then determining sort of what's the best strategy forward. So very, very insightful and helpful. And thank you, everybody. There is a question from the audience that came through about comparing traditional versus digital radio. And the question is sort of somewhat around measurement, where honestly, there are disconnects between the digital and the traditional measurement capabilities. Does the audience, or does the team rather, the panelists here, do they have any thoughts about how to properly balance digital versus linear or traditional radio? And what's the best way forward? sort of a general question out to the
I
panelists.
guess it could depend on like what we're measuring. I think if you want to measure like impact or brand lift or recall, I don't think it's that hard, right? Because you can measure all of that online while asking people if they heard this radio ad. That's just I know it's simple, but that'd probably be the easiest way if you want to measure your audio efforts holistically. But in terms of like direct response, I don't have an answer for that. That's a tough one because you know, like if you're doing it on the radio, you may use something like a unique phone number, or you could advertise a unique URL. You know what I mean? And then if you have a mechanism to bring those together with like omni-channel on your backend, then you could probably go that way. That's how I've seen people do it.
Terrific. So let's take a little bit of a jump over to the video side of the audio video panel that we're having here. And if there's time, we'll come back to some of the other questions that we had drafted. But video, OTT, in-stream, OLV, CTV, there's a lot of discussion around emerging CTV, the emerging CTV marketplace, and certainly the rise of streaming services. And I want to get back to that point at the end of the discussion. But with this, there's also a number of disparate systems that aren't yet fully connected to enable buyers to easily access this inventory. And so, Kenneth, I'll look to you first for this question, but what innovations have you seen, has the panel seen, that are making this emerging space easier to purchase and more in line with buying expectations?
So just so everyone knows, OTT content is normally viewed via CTV. And a CTV device could actually be a PlayStation, a smart TV, an Xbox, a Roku, or a Fire Stick. And OTT streaming services are Apple TV, Hulu, Disney, and the rest of all the world out there. So connected TV basically is a premium digital environment, which is also an effective medium, I would say, to reach your light TV viewers. So it's a very good strategy to complement your linear TV, and you can meet your cord nevers or the so-called cord cutters. I think many of us, unknowingly or knowingly, have actually bought CTV in our past life. Like, go open your YouTube post-report campaigns. I'm sure 15% of your buy is impressions actually delivered on a TV screen. That, my friends, is CTV. I think CTV is still in the early stages and will evolve as we speak. But the ability to understand and look at a video-only approach and look at what incremental reach a CTV can give your overall video buy is important. And that's where all our tech partners are currently innovating the space in. Something else which is very important is called automatic ACR, also known as automatic content recognition, which has been basically a game changer. You know what your audience is watching, you know when are they watching, you know how are they watching it, and you can actually give them conquesting ads as well. And I would say there was a recent MIQ upfront which happened I think last week, where they introduced Samba TV to their offering as well. So like what I would say is in the case of CTV, try and make sure you buy CTV through one platform, because don't go to multiple partners who offer you individual products, because that's where your reach and frequency can't be monitored. Try and go to one platform who could probably say, yes, we can monitor reach and frequency, and who could tap into multiple publishers. And right now I see footfall attribution being measured off CTV. We have brand lift studies. So yes, there's a lot of post-metric data which can say, how did your CTV campaign actually add value to your holistic video approach?
Terrific.
Yeah, just add to Ken's point. It's very key to like understand what CTV actually is and like how do you define a device, because you can get something on CTV and you can use one device, you can use two devices, you can use three devices. So like I give you guys an example. I have a smart TV with an interface. I put something on, I'm watching content, that's one device. I have a PlayStation connected to a smart TV. I put something on my PlayStation, I watch it on TV. That's two devices. Now I have my phone, right? I have a Chromecast and I have a TV. Now I have three devices. Which one of those do I really need to target to end up, you know, on the big TV screen? So like, I think you got to understand like how do you define a device? And today a definition of a device is anything with a processor, and that's pretty much anything. So you can get content to a screen by more means than one. So when you go buy ads that you hope end up on the TV, you need to be very cautious and very bit. Like basically what Kenneth is saying. There's things to consider when you do this, and you got to understand like what CTV is and actually how it works, because sometimes it's an actual device that you want to target, but sometimes it's a peripheral, right? Like it's like a printer, like you can't really target a printer. You can send like, prints there, but it's not a device that's meant for that. And CTV sometimes can be that. So you need to understand and be cautious of like what you're targeting. And exactly what Kenneth is saying today, if you look at your site report, domain report, you will see that you're in fact are buying CTV and you just may not know it.
Sure. Good reminder to always unpack some of those acronyms, right? And define them clearly, as sometimes they can overlap with one another, and sometimes they are very specific to a very specific type of media format. Tara, I wanted to ask you this next question. With the increased focus on video and the benefits of video, what does this mean for display advertising?
Well, obviously, digital display advertising has been around for quite a long time. I honestly, personally don't believe it's going anywhere. I truly believe that display advertising still has its place. There's a time and a place and a tactic to use it. Also, not all websites are going to be able to host 100% video. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to disappear, just from the fact that, there will be a need for it. There will be tactics that use it. So although video is wonderful and a great way to convey messages and engage with your consumers, I do think that display advertising will still be there for different reasons.
Terrific. This next question here was for Kenneth. As digital video continues to expand its reach and measurement, which is a topic that's very close to my heart at Double Verify, as measurement has become a bigger focus, we oftentimes talk about the metrics that matter. And I think, Yuli had alluded to that earlier, to aligning those metrics with the goals of the campaign and the marketing objectives. But what metrics will matter in the future? And will they be similar to what we see today, or will there be something entirely different that has yet to be developed?
If I must say, I would say the measurement in the digital media space will probably change tomorrow morning, and no one will know as well. It's that quick. All the ad tech companies keep reinventing the space, which Double Verify is one of them as well. I would say thanks to you guys, you bring out the best tech for us, and we're able to evolve the space. I think the current metrics will stay for the most of it, like VCR, video completion rate, B2 rates, unique reach, CTR, and so forth. But I know viewability as a metric is often discounted, and that should not be happening. And many clients don't demand a high viewability. I think viewability, it should be our main focus for any video campaign, because how would a campaign succeed if your viewability is low? And one metric which should not be looked at is a CPM. I see many people have a metric as a CPM. Sorry, you're wrong. Cheap inventory costs cheap. Premium inventory is expensive. So like you can't have CPM as a metric to determine that. So, and I would say going forward, we'll have more conversion tactics of video as well. Like right now, I know video is a very awareness driver, but some video formats do have high CTR as well. Like Teeds is our sponsor on this call here. They have something called as an outstream video. You can add an overlay, you can add an end card, and all those CTRs are pretty high, and they drive to the website as well. So yes, video isn't the best driver for conversion, but yeah, very soon you would see a small shift happening where through video as well, because of the high engagement units on the side, on the top and end card, you can drive that piece of consideration with your campaigns as well, leading to a conversion campaign. Yes, display is going to stay as is. We can't compete with that for a conversion campaign, but yeah, very soon video will see a small change as well.
Interesting. So on that point, and this question is for Yuli. So digital video has traditionally been thought primarily, even exclusively, as a branding vehicle. However, during the pandemic, more DR, direct response advertisers, were seeing some success in converting directly through their video commercials. So do we think that this will be a continued trend? Will we see more DR sort of based video advertisements in the CTV space? And how does that impact the growth, and what impact does that have on the digital video ecosystem?
Yeah, so there is a lot more DR stuff because people are finding ways to kind of tie, in a unique fashion, tie performance to a message that they put out or work into some sort of piece of content. So that's absolutely growing. There's a number of ways you can do it. And like I mentioned earlier, like if you want to use video for DR, all you need is like some kind of unique promo code or unique link or unique phone number, and you can title back. What I do foresee though, and I do see today, and I don't think we've mentioned it yet on this call, is as the popularity of CTV grows, it will drive CPMs, which is kind of expected, supply demand. But what I foresee happening is this demand grows and CPM grows. Ad fraud in CTV space is definitely going to grow. And if you're not thinking about it right now, you're not looking for ways to kind of fend your spend and make sure your money gets where it needs to go. Like you may have an issue in the very near future as this market booms, and then everybody wants to be in it. And if you're an agency, you might have a client who says, hey, I want to be here, here, and there. You just start putting money in all the places. You're lining up yourself to be a victim of ad fraud within the CTV environment is what I think. And that's one of the things you got to be very aware and active about today as the space is growing.
Mhm. Certainly a good plug for verification and the importance of validating your media investment, and through sort of better protection, realizing important improvements in performance. So that's certainly a well thought out perspective, and we appreciate your point of view there. Certainly more to come, and as investment flows into those ecosystems, as you noted, fraud oftentimes follows the money, and so looking out for those things will certainly be a key focus for ours moving forward. Tara, then this next question is for you, right? We talked a little bit about content and a little bit about the types of content and creative and commercials that are connecting most with consumers and the audiences. So, virtual cans right around the corner. So what brands do you think did a really good job of managing their messaging during the pandemic? Do you have any good creative examples that you think the audience would benefit from hearing about?
Yeah, for sure. I think from my perspective, what we saw in the campaigns that we ran, the TD Thanks You campaign from last year did a really, really great job of putting together content that spoke to all different walks of life. They really showcased individuals that were affected by COVID, and put a face to COVID essentially. What they were able to do was use a mix of shorter form content with longer form content. And the longer form content performed much better for the most part over the short. And I believe that's just because they were able to use storytelling. So they really told the stories of these individuals, how they were affected, and how TD was able to help them throughout COVID, obviously, trials and tribulations. But I think they did an outstanding job in that case.
Can I jump in here, Andrew?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we look at brands and storytelling, I think storytelling has evolved over the many years. Initially, it was long form content, and your story could be conveyed in say 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. But right now, storytelling has reduced a lot. So like right now, you need to think, how do you convey that bigger story in a shorter format? So a good example, which we are still in the pandemic. So a good example I saw, I think a couple of months back, was the Excel ad. I'm not sure how many of you have seen it right now. I'm not sure who's the agency for that, but a lovely creative where it says it's all coming back to me. And you're literally running from your homes. You haven't shared for 3 days. You're still in your pajamas, and you're saying, I need to go back to the office. And like the whole nostalgia about working from home, not going to the office, not meeting your friends, not seeing a restaurant. Your car is dirty because it's in the garage for the last 1 week. That's really, really good creative, because it's exactly what has happened to all of us as individuals over the last 1 year. And they're depicting that in ad. And I think they did a good job at it.
I think the opposite quite a bit. I think depicting all the things that made us depressed over the last year in the commercial, I turn those off. Like I you know what I mean? It makes me feel sad because that's what I am. That's where the whole world is, and we're in this, negative situation. So like I know what you mean, but that's not an ad I actually personally want to see. And like my example of something COVID related, pandemic related would be like I've seen recently. It was a podcast where a sponsor was a travel agency, and the podcast is done by a stand-up comic who can't perform because obviously like live performances is out of the question right now. So he switched to a podcast format, and he he had an ad slot, or if you want to call it that, where it's a section of a show where he clearly says, this section of a show is sponsored by this travel agency. I know we can't travel right now, but let me tell you some funny stories associated with travel. And he goes on telling all these jokes about, like horrible hotel stories, plane stories, and it's stuff that like, it makes you laugh and makes you feel happy. And you're like, man, I know what he's saying, and I want to feel good. I want to laugh like when I'm traveling. And in the background, he keeps mentioning this travel agency's name. So your spirit goes up. You're not like, oh my God, all this stuff is bad. You're like, man, these jokes are great, and I can definitely relate to some of them. And there's a message and an advertiser that's integrated into it. So I come out of that like feeling, I laughed. You know what I mean? I didn't feel depressed or reminded of all the bad stuff. I laughed. I feel good. I feel positive, and I'm thinking of this travel agency at the same time.
No, definitely agreeing to what you say, like definitely agree to that perspective as well. But I think as long as brands can show the before and the after, like, yes, this was your life, but this is how it's going to change. That's what gives a good brand messaging. Yes, I'm pretty sure seeing a person who hasn't shaved for like 1 week makes me feel sad or the car dirty, but like showing how is it coming back to life, like how is it all changing? That's the exciting piece of an ad as well.
A good reminder about creative development, aligning the creative with the right audience, and sort of thinking through the marketing and messaging strategy. Certainly, there's a lot of great content out there, and ensuring that there's proper alignment will have a bigger impact on the message, or of the message rather, on the audience. So let's stick with the COVID pandemic just for a quick second here. And Yuli, I'm going to look to you just for this question, but would love to open it up to the group. So clearly things have changed over the past year or so, but as people start to transition, right, as the vaccine becomes more readily available, as we look to the future, how will this return to office, return to school, return to sort of normal look like? What will the impact be? What trends do we anticipate will remain, and what things will we stop doing once we're all, quote unquote, back to the office and back to normal?
Yeah, good question. So there's like a couple ways to answer. There's a couple perspectives, like a trend from the consumer side. There's also could be a trend from the advertiser or a brand side. And like in my position, I kind of get to see both as I work for a big retailer. So I'll distinguish between the two. So like some of the trends that I've seen that have become like super key that are never as important before is UX, like user experience. Like are you enabling your user to engage with you as well or better than before, given like the physical limitations and the environment that we're in? Like, can they go on your website and properly do stuff? Can they log into your app or loyalty program and properly do stuff? And that's one of the things I feel that will that's a trend that will distinguish winners from maybe, like not winners. And second one is, this one is like even more important, is your omni-channel customer service in the pandemic environment, right? Like you can buy stuff, sure, and like your UX is great, you have selection, you have products in stock, you bought it, but hey, what happens if you you need to return a product or two and the stores are closed? And particular, like a brand or retailer does not have a return policy for pandemic. I feel like that's a trend that a lot of big brands need to get on if they have not, because that's something that could be damaging down the line, because you may be turning people away. Like they may be buying from you right now, but as they're doing that, they're learning that anything, like some of the post-purchase engagements are not as good as initial purchase engagement. And like this is obviously not new, like this is marketing 101, I mean, there's like stages and funnels to customer service and blah blah blah. I'm not going to get into it, but that's a trend that's surfaced to the top like it has never before, like omni-channel customer service, any way you put it. Now, if you look at some of the consumer trends, and this is strictly based on like what I see kind of every day from a personal perspective as a consumer and a little bit as a retailer. And I can tell you guys right now, anything that's sold out right now in stores, things like workout equipment, bikes, general outdoor products, kitchen stuff, like hobby stuff. I'm making a prediction right now. The stuff that's sold out right now, when the pandemic is considered over, you will see a boom of all these categories in the classified sites. And I think as an advertiser of any of those categories, as a vendor or a retailer, you really need to be aware of that. Like for example, today for, like myself, Canadian Tire, maybe it will make sense for us to advertise in one spot, because that's where people are looking for deals on brand new things. But a year from now, it may make sense for us to completely switch to a different publisher while still advertising the same thing, but only because like the majority of people are now here because the classified sections for these specific categories have blown up like crazy, which I predict they will, because you buy stuff to occupy your time, but when you go back to normal, you go, your subway, driving to work, office, meetings, after work activities, all these things that you bought, they're just going to sit there and people are going to put them up on, like secondhand classifieds. And as any advertiser, I think you need to be kind of wary of that. It's going to happen. You should consider that in your marketing strategy, I think.
Sure.
Just jumping in here as well, Andrew, a very important factor next year is going to be to not compare to your last year's plans, because what happened last year was, I would say, a pandemic year. Your the way people look at media will change. People might go back to work, so your radio consumption will increase, your TV consumption might increase, your out-of-home travel might increase. Like, make sure that you don't copy your plans from last year, because it won't matter next year. Next year, look at it as a fresh year. Look at it at a year where you have to start from scratch. Look at your audience inside. Look at how your consumer has changed. Look at the whole consumer journey, because what happened last year might not work this year for you guys.
Sure. Heather or Tara, do you have any predictions or thoughts on what behaviors or trends will either remain or which things will change as we start to come out of this pandemic?
Sure. Yep. In terms of podcasting, what we saw when the pandemic hit was instead of people consuming podcasts on their daily commute, which we used to see big spikes, at 9 and 5 when people trundled back and forth from home to office, people started to consume their podcasts at other times of day, which was wonderful to see. So they still wanted their podcast, they just needed other times of day to do it. So we saw the consumption of podcasts throughout the day change and on weekends. So we'll be paying attention to what happens when the commute returns, and is the commute returning for everybody? It may not be, or it's returning for a few days of the week, but it was wonderful to see that the demand increased, and people needed their podcasts and they needed more of them, whether it was to stay informed on some of the daily horrors we're living through, or to stay entertained, and to Yuli's point, to laugh and feel like life is normal a little bit. So it ticked a bunch of boxes, and in terms of responding to the pandemic, it really was a great space to be in. And I would never say anything is pandemic proof, because I believe in the jinx, but not needing cameras, not needing crane shots, not needing helicopter shots. Audio can be recorded, podcast audio can be recorded in a closet in a bedroom. And because it's relatively cheap to record, messaging can be changed to reflect tone, content. So it really was quite an easy pivot to respond to the pandemic that didn't require a great deal of heavy lifting that may have been a little bit more time consuming and costly in, say broadcast media, for example. So there you go.
Sure. Good.
I would, a small addition to that is that I think we're really going to see, obviously working mostly in the YouTube platform, is I think we're going to see a big change in the content that's being produced by the users. You're going to see the consumption as well change, going from like quarantine cocktail consumption and watching those types of videos to now moving towards what is my first trip after COVID. So there's really going to be extra, I would say, cool ways of reaching consumers with this new type of content that people are going to start producing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been hearing about vaxications and revenge travel, certainly hitting that industry and that sector. We have about 6 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure to address a couple of housekeeping items before putting out our final question about the streaming wars to the panelists. But I did want to say before we wrap here that thank you so much for our panelists in the Digital Day community and committee. Our title sponsors, certainly TEEDS and ACAST. We've had a great time so far, and we still have about 5 minutes left, so we'll be sure to end on a high note there. But I did want to say to the audience that please make sure to join us at 2 o'clock Eastern today for the gaming panel. And please note that it is a new event. So therefore, you will need to register separately and use a new Zoom link. Registration is still open for the gaming panel, and we hope to see you all there. So back to our regularly scheduled program here about the streaming wars. We'll go around, start with Kenneth. So there's a lot of chatter about the streaming wars. There's a lot of different providers out there. Little prediction here. How do the streaming wars end? Kick it off, Kenneth.
That's going to be a really hard prediction for me to make, but I think it'll never end. But probably what you'll see happening is consolidation of all media channels. You see consolidation of the streaming services. So that's my prediction. Major partners are going to come together and join hands.
Terrific. Heather, why don't we go to you?
Oh, geez, I don't really have too many thoughts on this other than I'm still astounded at just when I think I've reached a limit in terms of streaming consumption, how, what is the limit? I don't know. I haven't met that limit yet. There does appear to be enough hours in the day for me to keep signing up. So, it's interesting to watch, and it's exciting to see all of the content that is now becoming available with many different options for content creators that didn't exist 10 years ago. So that to me is wonderful to see. Thanks.
Sure. Yuli, why don't we kick it to you?
Yeah, so if we're talking about wars, I guess we're talking about a winner, right? Like that's the context we're in. And like, if you ask me, I think in the context of a war, I think Disney is going to win. I think Disney is going to win because Disney is really the only one who is able and actually is marketing to children, believe it or not, right? Like that is the biggest base. And as we say, children are our future. Like I have two, I have a 9-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I see what happens when they consume content. And I think like Netflix is well positioned to win the quote unquote streaming wars because they invest heavy into our future. And I think our future will be with Disney.
A very specific prediction. I love it. So Tara, let's kick it to you.
I also, I kind of took it on a little bit of a funny term. So I was going to say that Jeff Bezos finally reveals the true purpose behind his aerospace company, Blue Origin, and destroys all of his competitors from space. So he's the last one standing.
A little out there, but I like it. Oh, terrific, terrific. Well, this has been really a phenomenal panel. Thank you so much for all the panelists for contributing your content, your perspective, and your ideas. I agree with so many of you as we look to the streaming wars, that there's a lot of content. There's a proliferation of content out there. There will certainly be some consolidation. But I like the idea of looking to the children, right? The children are our future, and the type of content that they're consuming will in many ways set us up for the future foundation of how content is distributed, how advertising is assigned, and how much of that ecosystem gets funded. And certainly as we think about some of the big topics around consumer privacy, Bill C-11 that's out there, what the community is doing to balance targeted audience-specific messaging with the rights of consumers. And that conversation will continue to rage on, so to speak. And I do think that the marketplace will ultimately decide what is the best balance between a lot of those discussion points. So we have about a minute left. If anybody would love to say anything, the floor is yours. Otherwise, I'll say thank you. And thank you to the audience.
Guys, if you're thinking about putting your money into CTV and you've never done it before, or you've done it before, but now you're looking to scale, just be sure that you protect your investment. Just be sure you use some kind of measurement or fraud preventive tool to, be safe out there. Because if you don't, hey man, there's going to be some teenager in Eastern Ukraine driving a Lambo in the village that's funded by your CTV dollars. You got to be careful out there.
Terrific. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So we're at the 1:30 hour. I'll kick it back to the Digital Day team to close us out.
Hey, I think we're missing RJ, but this is too long. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that joined. I am the Digital Day Chair. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to Andrew for being our moderator. Thank you to Teeds and to RJ for throwing us into the discussion. And just a reminder to everyone that the gaming panel is happening at 2 o'clock. The registration is still open, so we hope that everybody can join. Thank you to our sponsors first and foremost. We couldn't have been able to do this without you guys. So thank you to Teeds, Acast, Narcity Media, Zephyr, and Acast. And hopefully we will see you guys all next year when this is live and in person. We can all share some drinks, some hugs, and maybe we will all be able to remove our masks.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Be
guys.
well, everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Stay safe.